My wife just dropped the bombshell that she's pregnant, but I can't shake the feeling that I'm not the father since I'm sterile. I go with it. I, 38 years old, married my wife, who is 33, 2 years ago. We had been together for 3 years, and she was definitely more interested in marriage than I was. However, to keep her happy, I decided to go along with it. About a year back, we began our journey to start a family. Once more, that was due to my wife's urging. During the time we were attempting to conceive, we faced numerous challenges, and it took a toll on my mental health, leading me to the decision to get tested. During our struggle to conceive, my wife's demeanor shifted, and I attempted to cope with her behavior, but it became overwhelming. A few days post-test, the doctors informed me that I was sterile. Honestly, that really shattered my heart. Although becoming a parent wasn't my choice, I had begun to picture my future as a father, and genuinely desired that role. Discovering that I would never have the chance to be a dad was incredibly heartbreaking for me at that moment. However, the most challenging part was still ahead. I had been struggling to find the right moment to confess to my wife that I was the reason behind our inability to conceive, but I was terrified of her reaction. She had been so cruel to me that I couldn't even picture how she'd react upon discovering that what she desired was likely never going to happen with me. I held off for a few days after learning the results of my test before telling my wife, but she ended up surprising me instead. 4 days after I learned that I was sterile, she sat me down and said she had some really important news to share. I was filled with dread, fearing that she had somehow discovered my condition. Instead, she had to share the news that she was finally pregnant. I was completely taken aback by what she was saying, but fortunately, she remained oblivious to my actual emotions and started celebrating right away. I attempted to share in her joy to avoid any doubts about me, but the following day, I was tested once more to verify my sterility, and once again, the results were the same. I found myself in a difficult situation because if I wasn't the father, it meant my wife was definitely being unfaithful. The medical procedures required for her to conceive artificially were costly, and as the sole breadwinner in our relationship, she had to approach me for financial support before proceeding with anything. It was clear that she was being unfaithful. The idea was so strange and unsettling that I chose to ignore it for several days while my wife organized a big celebration to reveal her pregnancy. She appeared genuinely joyful, while I felt completely broken inside. However, I had to mask my emotions because I was determined to uncover the truth behind this entire situation. I kept everything to myself, not even mentioning it to my family. It felt too uncomfortable and personal to share with anyone. I found myself unable to share my thoughts with my wife. Too much time had gone by, and I was desperate to uncover the identity of the father of her child. Confronting her might lead to her walking away, leaving me in the dark forever. Fortunately, I discovered it right on the day of the event. Many individuals were present, including our families, friends, and a handful of my coworkers. She also invited a neighbor who resided directly across the street from us. My neighbor, 27M, is a young guy and is clearly more attractive than I am, no question about it. Not only am I aware of this, but he likely stands out as more attractive than the majority, considering he's a model. However, he's still working hard to establish his reputation in the modeling industry. He relocated to his aunt's house, which she owns, to be nearer to the city, as his own family resides quite far away. My wife has always had a soft spot for this guy and would prepare meals for him and his aunt when he first moved in. He has visited our home for dinner several times, and we've had conversations about his job. He articulates his thoughts clearly and has a broad knowledge base. Plus, he's a literature major, just like my wife. They found common ground right away and connected immediately during their first encounter. I never had any issues with him. He appeared kind enough, and I had faith in my wife as well. However, when he walked into the house on the day of our gathering and my wife's eyes sparkled, I felt that something was different. As soon as he entered, she headed straight for him, embracing him tightly for a duration that far exceeded her greetings with the other guests. I was the only one who picked up on it, but I sensed something was off. I just needed a way to verify my suspicions. So I made an excuse to step away and went to the bedroom instead, where I opened my wife's laptop. few days after she revealed her pregnancy, I managed to check her phone while she was asleep, but I didn't come across anything unusual. Accessing her laptop turned out to be quite a challenge, as she was always glued to it, either watching something or typing away whenever I was around. Every time I inquired about what she was up to, she would pivot the screen away and insist she was focused on her novel. That had been happening for months, and I had honored her privacy because I genuinely believed she was focused on writing a novel. The circumstances had shifted, and I was convinced that there was no novel at all. It seemed like merely a cover to keep the contents of her laptop hidden from me. Fortunately, there wasn't a password or anything that posed a challenge for me to access. After some investigation, I managed to uncover another email account alongside a legitimate one. I changed to that one and reviewed the emails that had been sent and received. I sifted through those emails, and they were packed with declarations of love from my wife, as well as from our neighbor, the other guy. I noticed the email address because he was using his actual name. In the latest emails, she informed him that she was expecting a baby. He wasn't pleased and felt hurt, so the correspondence ceased for a bit, likely because he intended to cut ties. But my wife had no intention of letting that happen. Eventually, I received the most devastating email where she informed him that she had spoken to a friend who is a lawyer and that she would assist her in filing for divorce right after the baby is born. The only reason she attempted to persuade me to have a child was to secure both alimony and child support after the divorce, allowing her to run off with our neighbor a few months later and live her version of happily ever after. The moment I read that, I was filled with dread, and the sickening sensation still washes over me whenever that email crosses my mind. Regardless, I swiftly dismissed my emotions and returned to my tasks, snapping multiple photos of the email on my phone before powering it off and placing it back where I had discovered it. I was more appalled by my wife's actions than the infidelity itself. Cheating was one thing, but attempting to manipulate me into having a child with her and then expecting me to cover all the expenses just so she could support her dream life with her struggling boyfriend was absolutely insane. What really blew my mind was how incredible she was at acting. I had no clue whatsoever. Her joy was unsettling, yet my anger about the situation pushed me to go above and beyond for my revenge. I decided to go along with the plan, and then I'd reveal the truth when she least anticipated it. I refused to let her escape the pain, betrayal, and frustration that consumed me when I discovered her deceit. Label me however you want, but I acted in accordance with my beliefs. For the next 9 months, I embraced the role of the ideal husband and father-to-be. It was difficult to accept that she had been deceiving me all along, but with each lie and her facade of happiness, my determination to confront the truth only grew stronger. I was present at every appointment with her doctor, ensured she took her vitamins punctually, and did everything I could to be a supportive husband. Then at last, a few days ago, my wife went into labor. I felt a wave of anxiety wash over me, as anyone would in my position. I set everything else aside and drove her to the hospital on my own. I had already contacted her parents, but I chose not to reach out to mine. I wanted to avoid any potential drama if things took a turn for the worse. So her parents had to drive for an hour to reach the hospital, which gave us some time alone, and that's when I decided to reveal the big news to her. Once she was safely inside the room, I informed her that I would step out to call our neighbor so he could come over for her. She seemed surprised and hesitated as she expressed that it wasn't necessary, and she preferred not to have someone unfamiliar present during the birth. With a smile, I presented her the results of my fertility test alongside the divorce papers, which I had filed just days before her due date, ensuring I had them with me that day. She processed everything, still appearing puzzled, so I clarified that I couldn't possibly impregnate her even if I had wanted to, meaning the baby wasn't mine. At that point, I revealed the emails I had discovered on her hidden account, and she finally understood what was happening. The expression on her face was unforgettable as I stepped out and she fumbled for something to say. I honestly felt like I might end up in the hospital myself, given how fast my heart was racing when I finally stepped outside and called our neighbor to let him know that my wife was in labor. I didn't wait for him to say anything. and ended the call as quickly as possible. After that, I hopped into my car and waited for my wife's family to arrive. As soon as I noticed her dad's car arriving in the driveway, I took off without wasting any time. I even powered down my phone just to be safe and drove for a bit until I reached this motel on the outskirts of town. I had packed my bags a few weeks prior and stored them in the boot of my car, ensuring I had everything I needed and wouldn't be caught off guard at any moment. I spent the remainder of the day glued to the TV, sipping on beer, and engaging in every distraction I could find to escape my thoughts. I fell asleep that night, feeling a sense of peace, relieved that I had finally wrapped up this entire ordeal. The following morning, I got up and finally powered on my phone. Of course, my phone was flooded with messages from my wife and neighbor, but I didn't even bother to check those. Instead, I took a look at the texts from my parents and brother. I figured my wife must have reached out to them when she couldn't get in touch with me, so I decided to return my parents' call and have a conversation with them. I informed them that I would be returning home shortly and suggested they bring my brother along, if they could, so I could clarify the whole situation for them. They deserved to know what was going on. I arrived at my parents' house, and my brother was already there. They all looked confused and somewhat annoyed, which was understandable since I had just missed the birth of my own child, causing them to miss the birth of their grandchild as well. So I gathered them and laid out the entire situation, sharing my motivations for my actions. By the end of my explanation, they were left without words. I anticipated a flood of questions and accusations, yet surprisingly, none came my way. My dad simply expressed his hope that nothing worse would occur, and as for the others, they had no additional comments, so everything remained calm on that front. A few days ago, my family has been pretty quiet, but my wife has taken it upon herself to blame me for ruining her experience of becoming a mother for the first time. Ever since I left, she's been reaching out through calls and texts, but I haven't responded to any of it. My neighbor reached out a few hours ago, letting me know that my wife was quite upset. They suggested that we should put our differences aside for her sake and at least attempt to resolve things together this time. The nerve of these people is unbelievable. They keep trying to engage with me as if this is some trivial matter that I'm overreacting to. He brought up a few other points in his message, including how my wife had begun to rekindle her feelings for me during her pregnancy, which had surprised both of them. He suggested that I should consider giving our marriage another shot. I don't buy that at all. If she was really starting to have feelings for me again, then why was my neighbor still around? I really can't understand why they believe I'm that foolish. My wife is frustrated, and honestly, there's not much I can do to change that. She's primarily upset that I was aware of everything from the start, yet still decided to be with her and endure this entire charade, claiming that I had deceived her. Am I the idiot for staying with my wife during her pregnancy and deceiving her, even though I knew the baby wasn't mine and that she had been cheating on me with our neighbor? Update 1. It's been nearly a week since the baby arrived, and I've been residing in a hotel room. I haven't visited my wife yet, and I don't intend to go either. She's still reaching out through texts and calls, but I can't understand why. I've been clear that I'm not interested in talking to her or listening to what she has to say. I haven't blocked her yet, but I did block my neighbor. He decided it was his place to text me, reminding me that my wife was still holding out hope and wanted me to reconnect with her. I'm convinced that the sole reason he's sticking by her and pushing me to forgive her is so she can benefit from the divorce settlement and alimony, especially since neither of them has a job. My wife was a stay-at-home spouse, which I appreciated and respected. However, she wasn't just at home doing chores. She was also cheating on me behind my back, and that was unforgivable. Just to clarify, I wasn't the one who proposed that she leave her job after getting married. Honestly, I was really supportive of her during our relationship when she was working. It was her decision to quit and focus on managing our home, and I didn't oppose it since it was what she wanted and my income was sufficient. I'm confident my lawyer can help me avoid paying alimony once we establish that she was cheating, which I believe will be straightforward to prove. My neighbor is still having a tough time landing decent modeling jobs, so managing his own bills, my wife's expenses, and a baby on top of that seems nearly impossible for them, even with all their finances pooled together. Good luck to them. I'm really relieved to be free from this situation and won't have to offer them anything, not even my focus. I really hope my wife understands this and doesn't prolong the process by fighting the divorce. I'm really hoping she won't. Regards that, but considering the complete absence of common sense, it's entirely possible. I'm ready for that outcome too. The images of the emails that were sent through her hidden email account are securely stored on my phone and backed up on my laptop, so I feel pretty confident about it. Regardless of whether she chooses to remove her account, those images I possess will remain untouched, and I'm confident I'll be just fine. If it comes down to it, I'll cover the alimony, but the important thing is that I won't have to stay with her. She ought to consider herself fortunate. I'm allowing her to leave the house on her own and haven't resorted to any forceful eviction since the property is in my name. I'm staying optimistic and hoping this will pass quickly. I can't wait for tomorrow. It's my wedding day. My wife had been in tears, so I found myself soothing both her and our child. I considered calling the police too, but she convinced me to drop it because she wanted to avoid any further issues. She kept apologizing repeatedly for what had occurred, expressing that her desperation to be with the one she loved had caused her to lose all sense of self-respect and morals. She was genuinely remorseful about everything. She said she's ready to accept whatever comes next and won't be negotiating anymore, so the divorce can be finalized more quickly. That's definitely a positive aspect. I really hope she chooses to press charges in the end and finds a way to heal herself too. At the end of the day, I did what I could and tried to be a good person, and I have no regrets.